HarperCollins presents Growing Season by Seni Glaister. Read by Kristin Atherton. Cut grass lies frail. Brief is the breath. Mown stalks exhale. Excerpt from Cut Grass by Philip Larkin. Permission kindly given by Faber and Faber. Prologue. Yew Lane was not exactly a lane, but rather a cul-de-sac. It led nowhere in particular, but served as the peaceful access to a number of small detached and semi-detached houses. As a no-through road, it offered few opportunities for passers-by to chance upon it. Its purpose was simply to deliver the homeowners to their front doors, whilst also offering a couple of laybys, just wide enough to accommodate the increasingly frequent delivery vans that liked to turn themselves around indignantly after hurling their parcels carelessly over hedges. Each home in Yew Lane had probably once boasted a much larger garden, but these spaces had proven very fruitful to land-hungry developers who could turn one plot into 4, each with an easily maintained garden or off-road parking. Gradually, those little in-between spaces, the scraps of land, the allotments, the wooden-framed single garages, the creaky lean-tos, and the orchards, had all been usurped, largely to the satisfaction of all, except, perhaps, the bees, who rued the loss of blossom, and the occasional deer who had once supplemented their diets with roses and wintergreens, but who were now thwarted by the high fences that served to carefully cordon off one property from the next. Broom Cottage was the furthest of the properties on the lane, the last before some scrappy woodland, that itself led to some more substantial woodland and arable fields beyond. The garden of Broom Cottage was just small enough to have been ignored by prospectors, so it remained intact, offering a nice patch of lawn behind the brick-built cottage with its pretty half-hung tiles. Like all the houses in Yew Lane, the garden had a high wooden fence on all sides. Broom Cottage, however, still boasted a small garage, and a path led between this and the house to the lawn behind it. The front of the house was north-facing, but the garden side of the house was south-facing, and, to any future gardener, that was what counted. At the back of the garage, in the corner of the garden, a narrow wooden gate opened onto a public footpath. Diana stood on the footpath, with her back to these houses, and to the woodland below her. She looked through a small gap between the fence post and the gate, quietly observing the arrival of the latest newcomers to Broom Cottage. She had first been alerted by the constant beeping of a removal van, reversing the length of Yew Lane, and she'd been anxious to find out what sort of neighbour she would have on her hands. The previous gentleman had been elderly. He'd never given Diana any bother. Even his ultimate departure had passed without fuss. And then the developers had come in with their skips and scaffolding, and she'd watched with concern to see what atrocities they might bestow on the pretty little cottage. But fortunately, the house and its small garden had survived the process unscathed. Once Diana had begun her vigil, her interest had been further piqued by the intriguing young woman who seemed to be coordinating the move. She was very young, not yet 30, and appeared entirely in charge. But there was something complicated about her, Diana felt. She appeared confident when she greeted the removal men, issuing directions with a clear, happy voice, and plying them with tea, demonstrating the genteel manners of a much older woman. But when Diana caught glimpses of her alone, off guard, her face appeared careworn, and she often displayed a worried frown as she scurried from place to place. Diana had taken up her watch-post a number of times, and she was there when the removals van eventually left. She wondered, while she watched the driver gun the big vehicle's engine to life, why they were always called removal vans. Removal was only half the story.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?